The gunshot that shattered the mirror behind the bar in Deadwood's Silver Dollar Saloon did not come from any man's hand, and that was the first thing Cole Brennan noticed when he walked through the swinging doors on that scorching afternoon in June of 1876. The woman holding the smoking revolver stood with her feet planted wide, her dark hair cascading from beneath a weathered hat, her green eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to set the already stifling air on fire. The man cowering behind an overturned table was twice her size, a burly miner with hands like ham hocks and a face that had clearly seen its share of brawls. Yet he looked at her with the kind of fear usually reserved for grizzly bears and Apache war parties. "You will apologize," she said, her voice steady despite the rage that radiated from her like heat from a forge. "Or the next one goes through your hand instead of the mirror." Cole leaned against the doorframe, a slow smile spreading across his sun-weathered face. He had ridden into Deadwood expecting another dull stop on his way through the Dakota Territory, just another town full of desperate prospectors and tired prostitutes, another place where nothing ever happened that he had not seen a dozen times before. This, however, was something new. The bartender, a rail-thin man with a nervous twitch, cleared his throat. "Miss Cassidy, please, there is no need for more shooting. Bad for business, you understand." "Then tell your customer here that grabbing a woman without her permission is bad for his health," she replied without taking her eyes off the miner. Her finger remained steady on the trigger, and Cole noticed her grip was practiced, professional. This was not some girl playing at being dangerous. This was someone who knew exactly how to use that weapon. The miner finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a squeak than the booming tone Cole imagined he usually employed. "I apologize, Miss Cassidy, sincerely, did not mean no disrespect." "Any disrespect," she corrected coldly. "If you are going to grovel, at least do it with proper grammar." She lowered the gun slowly, though her stance remained ready, alert. "Now get out of my sight before I change my mind about the hand." The miner scrambled to his feet and practically ran for the door, nearly colliding with Cole in his haste to escape. Cole stepped aside smoothly, still watching the woman as she finally holstered her revolver with a practiced motion that spoke of years of familiarity. The bartender sighed heavily and reached for a broom. "That is the third mirror this month, Cassidy." "Then perhaps you should be more selective about your clientele, Samuel," she replied, her voice losing some of its edge now that the immediate threat had passed. She turned toward the bar and finally noticed Cole standing in the doorway. Her eyes swept over him in a quick, assessing glance that took in everything from his worn boots to the Colt revolver hanging low on his hip to the dust that covered his dark coat. "And here is another drifter come to try his luck in the diggings. Deadwood is full up, stranger. Try Rapid City." Cole pushed off from the doorframe and walked slowly into the saloon, his spurs making soft music against the wooden floor. "Was not planning on digging for gold," he said easily. "Got no patience for that kind of work. Name is Cole Brennan." "Congratulations on having a name," she replied with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Samuel whiskey, the good bottle, not the rot gut you serve the miners. Right away, Cassidy." The bartender produced a bottle from beneath the counter and poured her a generous measure. Cole took a seat at the bar, leaving one stool between them. He removed his hat and set it on the counter, running a hand through his dark hair. "You always shoot up saloons, or was today special?" She picked up her glass and downed the whiskey in one smooth motion, not even wincing at what Cole knew from the bottle's label was raw frontier liquor that could strip paint. Only when men cannot keep their hands to themselves. Which, given the general population of this God-forsaken town, means about twice a week. "Seems like an expensive habit," Cole observed, nodding at the shattered mirror. "I pay for the damages," she said shortly. "Samuel keeps a running tab. Do not worry, stranger, it is not your concern." "Cole," he corrected gently. "And I was not worried, just impressed. That was a good shot, especially for someone who was presumably quite angry." For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across her face, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Anger improves my aim. The madder I get, the steadier my hand becomes. It is a peculiar talent, I will admit. Samuel finished sweeping up the glass and disappeared into the back room, muttering about ordering yet another mirror from Chicago. The saloon was otherwise empty in the afternoon heat, most of the prospectors either working their claims or sleeping off the previous night's drinking. Cole ordered a beer and took a long drink, letting the lukewarm liquid wash away some of the trail dust from his throat. That miner seemed pretty scared of you. I take it this is not the first time you two have had words. Buck Henderson is a pig who thinks every woman in Deadwood is his for the taking, Cassidy said flatly. I have disabused him of this notion 3 times now. You would think he would learn, but apparently his skull is too thick for knowledge to penetrate. 3 times, Cole repeated thoughtfully. Most women would have left town by now or found a husband for protection. Her laugh was harsh and without humor. A husband. Yes, because trading one man's authority for another is such a brilliant solution. I would rather eat my own gun than become some man's property, bound by law to obey his every whim and lose all claim to anything I own or earn. Cole held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. Was not suggesting you should, just noting what most women in your position might do. You are clearly not most women. She turned to look at him fully for the first time, really studying his face. He bore her scrutiny calmly, used to being assessed. He was 26 years old, with the kind of weathered good looks that came from years spent outdoors in all weathers. His eyes were a pale blue that could turn hard as ice when necessary, but right now they held only honest curiosity and that lingering amusement. You are right, she said finally. I am not most women. My father made sure of that before he died, taught me to shoot, to fight, to think for myself. Said the world was not kind to women who could not defend themselves, so he made certain I could. Now I run his freight business, haul supplies from Cheyenne to Deadwood and back again, and take no grief from anyone. Freight business, Cole said, his respect audibly increasing. That is dangerous work, especially on these roads. Bandits, hostile tribes, whether... I manage, she said simply. I have good men working for me, men who know I will put a bullet in anyone who crosses us and word gets around. Most bandits find easier targets. I believe it, Cole murmured. He took another drink of his beer, then said casually, You know, you never actually told me your name. Samuel called you Cassidy and Miss Cassidy, but I am guessing there is more to it than that. She hesitated, and he could see her weighing whether this stranger was worth the information. Finally, she said, Cassidy Jane Wolfe. My father was Thomas Wolfe, ran freight in these territories for 20 years before a bad winter took him last year. I inherited the business, such as it is. Sorry for your loss, Cole said, and meant it. He knew what it was like to lose family, to suddenly be alone in a world that did not care much whether you lived or died. Cassidy shrugged, but he could see the old grief in her eyes. He lived the life he wanted and died in his own bed instead of on the trail, better than most get in this country. They sat in silence for a moment, and Cole found himself oddly comfortable despite the circumstances. There was something about this woman, this fierce creature who shot mirrors and threatened miners and ran a freight business in one of the most dangerous territories in America, that intrigued him in a way nothing had in a very long time. So if you are not here to dig for gold, what brings you to Deadwood? Cassidy asked finally, pouring herself another whiskey from the bottle Samuel had left on the bar. Boredom mostly, Cole admitted with a crooked grin. I have been drifting since I left Texas 3 years ago. Worked as a ranch hand in Wyoming, a scout for the Army in Montana, a guard on a stage line in Colorado. Nothing stuck. Nothing felt like it mattered. Thought maybe the Black Hills would offer something different, but so far it is the same story everywhere. Men digging in the dirt, dreaming of wealth they will never find, while other men prey on those dreams. You have an awfully dim view of humanity for someone so young, Cassidy observed. I am 26, Cole said, old enough to have seen how the world works. And you do not look much older than me, so I would not be throwing stones about youth. 23, she admitted. But I have been running freight crews and dealing with every kind of bastard the frontier produces since I was 20, so I have earned my cynicism. Cole raised his glass in a mock toast to cynicism earned through bitter experience. She clinked her glass against his, and this time when she smiled, it reached her eyes. You are a strange one, Cole Brennan. Most men who walk into a saloon after watching a woman shoot up the place either want to prove they are tougher than her or scramble for the hills. You just sat down and started a conversation like this was a church social. Like I said, I was getting bored, Cole replied. Then I walked in and saw someone interesting for the first time in months. Why would I run from that? Cassidy studied him with those sharp green eyes, and Cole had the distinct feeling she was seeing straight through to his bones, reading all the parts of him he usually kept hidden. I should warn you, she said slowly. I have a temper that has scared off most men who have tried to court me. I do not simper or flatter or make myself smaller to fit into someone else's idea of what a woman should be. I get angry, I speak my mind, and when crossed, I am meaner than a rattlesnake with a toothache. Cole's grin widened into something genuine and delighted. Good, he said simply. I was getting bored here. For a moment, Cassidy just stared at him, clearly not having expected that response. Then, to his surprise and pleasure, she laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and unguarded, and it transformed her entire face from something fierce and forbidding into something beautiful. You are either very brave or very stupid, she declared. Probably a bit of both, Cole admitted cheerfully. But life is too short to play it safe all the time. Samuel emerged from the back room carrying a crate of bottles and stopped short when he saw Cassidy laughing. He looked between her and Cole with evident surprise, as though he had never seen such a thing before. Well now, he muttered. Will wonders never cease? Cassidy shot him a look that could have curdled milk. Do not you have inventory to take or floors to sweep? Just surprised to see you looking happy is all, Samuel said mildly, setting down his crate. Makes a nice change from the usual scowling and shooting. I do not scowl, Cassidy protested. You absolutely scowl, Cole interjected. I have been here less than an hour and I have already seen several variations of it. There is the annoyed scowl, the furious scowl, and what I am guessing is the thinking scowl. She turned the full force of her glare on him, but he could see she was fighting not to smile. You are making a terrible first impression. On the contrary, I think I am doing quite well, Cole said. You have not shot me yet, which given the mirror situation seems like a ringing endorsement. This time she did not try to hide her smile. The day is young. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Cole learned that Cassidy ran supply routes twice a month, making the trek from Cheyenne to Deadwood with wagon loads of everything from flour and sugar to mining equipment and whiskey. She had 4 men on her crew, all veteran teamsters who respected her authority because she had proven herself tougher and smarter than any of them. She knew every mile of the trail, every river crossing, every place where bandits might wait in ambush. In turn, Cole told her about his own wanderings, about growing up on a cattle ranch in Texas before the war came and took his father and older brother. His mother had died of fever when he was 17, leaving him alone with a property he could not manage by himself and debts he could not pay. He had sold everything and headed north, looking for something he could not quite name, some purpose or place where he fit. Sounds lonely, Cassidy said quietly when he finished. It was, Cole agreed, but you get used to it after a while, or at least you tell yourself you do. She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. When my father died, half the men in Deadwood expected me to sell the business and move back east to live with relatives. Some of them offered to buy me out for pennies on the dollar, probably thinking I was too grief-stricken or stupid to know what the operation was really worth. Others just assumed I would fail within a month or two. Let me guess, Cole said. You told them all to go to hell and proved them wrong. I did not use those exact words, Cassidy said with a slight smile. But yes, essentially. I bought out my father's business partner who was skimming profits and treating the Teamsters poorly. I negotiated new contracts with the mining companies and merchants in town. And when the first bandit tried to stop one of my wagons, I shot him in the leg and left him tied to a tree for the marshal to collect. Cole whistled low. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Too late for that, probably, she said lightly. I have a bad side, a worse side, and on rare occasions, a tolerably pleasant side. You have not yet done anything to earn the latter. Then I better work on that, Cole said. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. What would it take to see this tolerably pleasant side? Flowers, poetry. A heartfelt declaration of admiration. All of those would probably make me shoot you, Cassidy said dryly. I despise empty flattery and meaningless gestures. Good thing I am not offering either, Cole replied, but I would genuinely like to see you again if you are amenable. Maybe buy you dinner that does not come from a saloon kitchen. Cassidy regarded him thoughtfully, and Cole found himself holding his breath, waiting for her answer. He could not remember the last time a woman had intrigued him this much, could not remember caring whether someone said yes or no to his company. I leave for Cheyenne day after tomorrow, she said finally. 3-week round trip, assuming the weather holds and we do not run into trouble. When I get back, if you are still in Deadwood and still interested, we can discuss dinner. It was not exactly an enthusiastic yes, but it was not a no either, and Cole decided to count it as a victory. I will be here, he promised. Do not make promises you cannot keep, Cole Brennan, Cassidy warned. 3 weeks is a long time and you strike me as the restless type. You might get bored and move on before I return. Not this time, Cole said with certainty. I have a feeling Deadwood just got a lot more interesting. She stood and dropped a few coins on the bar to cover her drinks and the mirror she had destroyed. We will see. Try not to get yourself killed while I am gone. I would hate to return and find out you were just another drifter who talked big and died small. I will do my best to stay alive, Cole assured her. Mostly because I want to know what other variations of scowling you have in your repertoire. Cassidy shook her head, but she was smiling as she walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at him. For what it is worth, Cole Brennan, you are not what I expected when you walked in here. Is that good or bad? He called after her. I have not decided yet, she replied, and then she was gone, leaving only the scent of gunpowder and whiskey and something that might have been lavender in her wake. Samuel reappeared at Cole's elbow, wiping down the bar with a rag that had seen better days. You have got guts, son. I will give you that. Most men take one look at Cassidy Wolfe when she is in a mood and decide their chances are better elsewhere. Most men are cowards, Cole said simply. He finished his beer and stood, dropping coins on the bar. Where can a man find decent lodging in this town, Mrs.? Harper runs a boarding house on the north edge of town, Samuel replied. Clean beds, good food, and she does not allow gambling or prostitutes on the premises, so it is quieter than most places around here. Sounds perfect, Cole said, collecting his hat. Tell me, Samuel, what do you know about Cassidy's freight business? She looking for extra hands, Samuel raised his eyebrows. You thinking of signing on, thinking about it, Cole confirmed. I need work, and it sounds more interesting than mucking out stables or dealing cards to drunk minors. She pays fair and keeps her word, Samuel said slowly. But she expects loyalty and hard work, and if you cross her, well, you saw what happens to men who cross her. She does not forgive easily, and she never forgets. Good to know, Cole said. He tipped his hat to the bartender and headed for the door. Thanks for the information, Samuel. I will be seeing you around. He stepped out into the brutal afternoon sun and paused to get his bearings. Deadwood sprawled through a narrow gulch, buildings packed tight on either side of the main street, with prospectors' tents and ramshackle shelters climbing the surrounding hillsides. The air smelled of wood smoke and human waste, and the peculiar mineral tang that came from the mining operations. It was not a pretty town, not by any measure, but it was alive in a way that some of the more settled places Cole had passed through were not. Everything here felt raw and immediate, as though the future was being written in real time and nobody knew how the story would end. He found Mrs. Harper's boarding house without difficulty and secured a room on the second floor with a view of the street. It was small but clean, with a real bed and a washstand and a window that actually opened. After weeks of sleeping on the ground or in flea-infested way stations, it felt like luxury. Cole washed the trail dust from his face and hands, changed into a clean shirt, and then set about the business of learning everything he could about Cassidy Wolfe and her freight operation. He was a man who believed in doing his research, and if he was going to stay in Deadwood, if he was going to pursue this fierce woman who shot mirrors and scared miners, he wanted to know what he was getting into. The next 2 days passed in a blur of careful investigation. Cole talked to merchants who relied on Cassidy's freight services, and heard nothing but praise for her reliability and fair prices. He spoke with teamsters who had worked for her father and now worked for her, and they all said variations of the same thing. She was tough but fair, paid on time, and would back her men in a fight. He even tracked down the marshal, a weathered old lawman named Tom Carter, who confirmed that Cassidy had indeed left a bandit tied to a tree 6 months back. Could have killed him, Carter said, tobacco juice staining his gray beard. Man had shot at her wagon, nearly hit one of her drivers. Would have been justified, but she just winged him and left him for me with a note explaining the situation. That is the kind of woman she is. Will not kill unless she has to, but will not hesitate if it comes to that. She runs a clean operation, Cole asked. Cleanest in the territory, Carter confirmed. Tom Wolfe was honest as the day is long, and his daughter is the same. You will not find her hauling stolen goods or contraband. Everything she carries is legal and accounted for. Armed with this information, Cole presented himself at the freight office on the morning of Cassidy's departure. The office was a sturdy wooden building near the edge of town, with a corral out back where a dozen mules and horses waited in the early dawn light. 3 wagons were already loaded and being hitched, and teamsters moved with the efficient speed of men who had done this same job 100 times before. Cassidy stood near the lead wagon, checking the load manifest with one of her drivers. She wore men's trousers and a leather vest over a simple cotton shirt, her hair braided and pinned up under her hat. She looked up as Cole approached, surprise flashing briefly across her face before her expression settled back into neutral wariness. "Cole Brennan," she said evenly. "I did not expect to see you at this hour. Do you need something?" "Work," he said simply. "I hear you might be short a man after that incident with the bandit last season." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You have been asking about me." "I have," Cole confirmed, seeing no point in lying. "Wanted to know if you were on the level before I offered my services. Turns out you are. So here I am, offering. I can handle a team, I can shoot straight, and I do not run from trouble. That has to be worth something." "Can you cook?" Cassidy asked unexpectedly. Cole blinked. "What?" "Can you cook?" she repeated patiently. "Trail food, I mean. Beans, bacon, coffee, basic meals that will keep men going through a long day." "I can manage," Cole said cautiously. "Not fancy, but edible." "Good, because our cook quit last week to try his hand at prospecting, and I need someone who can handle meals as well as driving." She looked him up and down assessingly, the same look she had given him in the saloon but more thorough. 3 weeks out and back. $40 for the round trip, plus meals and a bedroll. You follow orders without argument, you pull your weight, and if we run into trouble, you stand and fight instead of cutting loose and running. "Deal," Cole said immediately. "Do not agree so fast," Cassidy warned. "You have not heard the rest yet. I am in charge, period. Not your fellow driver, not the men who have been doing this longer than you, me. You do not question my decisions in front of the others, and if you have a problem with how I run things, you bring it to me privately and be prepared to either accept my answer or draw your pay and leave when we get back." "Understood," Cole said. He met her eyes steadily. I am not here to challenge your authority, Cassidy. I am here to work and because I want to get to know you better, in that order. Something that might have been approval flickered in her expression. Fine. Get your gear and report to Jack Granger. He drives the second wagon and will show you the ropes. We leave in 30 minutes. Cole hurried back to the boarding house, packed his few belongings, and settled his account with Mrs. Harper. When he returned to the freight office, the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky with streaks of gold and rose. The wagons were ready, the teams hitched and waiting, and the 4 other men of Cassidy's crew were mounted and prepared to depart. Jack Granger turned out to be a lean man in his 40s with sun-weathered skin and intelligent brown eyes. He looked Cole over with the same assessing gaze Cassidy had used, then nodded once. "You look like you can handle yourself. That is good. This run, we got extra payroll for one of the big mining operations, which means we might attract attention from the wrong sort. You keep your eyes open and your gun handy." "Will do," Cole promised. The other men introduced themselves as the wagons rolled out. Pete Sanderson drove the third wagon, a stocky man with a booming laugh and forearms like tree trunks. Danny Wright, young and eager at 19, served as the relief driver and general hand. And bringing up the rear was Moses Franklin, an older black man who had been driving freight since before the war and knew the trails better than anyone, except possibly Cassidy herself. They made good time that first day, following the trail south and east out of the Black Hills. Cassidy set a steady pace, pushing hard but not so hard that they wore out the teams. She rode her horse at the front of the convoy, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon and the tree line, always alert for potential danger. Cole found himself watching her more than he probably should have, admiring the easy way she sat her saddle, the confidence in every movement. She rode like someone who had been born on horseback, completely at home in the wilderness. When they stopped to rest the teams at midday, Jack pulled Cole aside. "Word of advice," the older man said quietly. "Whatever you are thinking when you look at the boss, stop thinking it." Cole felt his face heat slightly. "That obvious?" To anyone paying attention, Jack confirmed. "Look, I get it. Cassidy is beautiful and tough and about as fascinating as a woman can be. But she is also our employer, and more than that, she is a good person trying to make her way in a world that does not want to let her. The last thing she needs is some lovesick cowboy making things complicated." "I am not some lovesick cowboy," Cole protested, though he was not entirely sure that was true. "I just find her interesting." "Interesting," Jack repeated dryly. "Right. Just keep it professional until we get back to Deadwood, and then if you want to court her proper, that is your business. But out here on the trail, we are a crew that has to trust each other completely. Romance messes that up." Cole nodded slowly, acknowledging the wisdom in Jack's words. "You are right. I will keep my head in the game." "See that you do," Jack said, though his tone was not unkind. "And for what it is worth, you could do a lot worse than Cassidy Wolfe. She's got a good heart under all that armor, just takes the right person to find it." That night they made camp in a clearing beside a creek. The wagons pulled into a defensive circle out of long habit. Cole proved his worth by producing a decent meal of beans and bacon with fresh biscuits cooked in a Dutch oven, and even Cassidy nodded in approval when she accepted her plate. "Not bad, Brennan," she said, settling down on a log near the fire. "Maybe you will work out after all." "High praise from the boss," Danny said with a grin. "She told our last cook his biscuits tasted like rocks and his coffee was barely fit to strip rust off wagon wheels." "That is because they were and it was," Cassidy replied without heat. She ate methodically, clearly hungry after a long day in the saddle. The men swapped stories as the darkness deepened and the stars emerged overhead, brilliant and countless in the clear frontier sky. Moses told a tale about outrunning a war party in Montana, while Pete shared a story about the time he had accidentally driven his wagon through a church picnic and spent the next month apologizing to every matron in town. Cole found himself relaxing into the camaraderie, the easy fellowship of men who worked well together and trusted each other. It reminded him of better times on his family's ranch, before death and debt had scattered everything. When the stories finally wound down and the men began rolling out their bedrolls, Cassidy stood and stretched. "Cole, take first watch with me, 2 hours, then wake Jack and Pete for second shift." Cole collected his rifle and followed her away from the fire, out to where they could see the surrounding landscape without the flames ruining their night vision. The moon was waning but still bright enough to cast shadows, and the creek burbled softly nearby. They stood in silence for a while, both watching and listening. Finally, Cassidy said quietly, "You did good today, kept up, did not complain, made a decent meal. Maybe hiring you was not a mistake." "Maybe," Cole echoed with gentle humor, still reserving judgment. "I always reserve judgment," Cassidy replied. "People can seem one way and turn out to be completely different. I learned that lesson early." "Bad experience?" Cole asked. She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then she said, "When I was 20, there was a man. Charming, handsome, said all the right things. My father did not trust him, but I thought I knew better, thought I was in love." "What happened?" Cole prompted gently when she fell silent again. "He tried to convince me to marry him, said we would be partners in every way," Cassidy said, her voice flat. "Then I overheard him talking to his friend. Turned out he had no interest in me at all, just wanted access to my father's business and money. Figured once we were married, he would take over and I would be a dutiful little wife who stayed home and had babies." "What did you do?" Cole asked, though he thought he could guess. "I confronted him in front of half the town, told him exactly what I thought of him and his plans, and then I may have fired a gun near his feet to encourage him to leave Deadwood," Cassidy said with grim satisfaction. "He took the hint. Last I heard, he was trying the same scheme on some merchant's daughter in Denver." "You warned her?" Cole asked. "I sent a letter," Cassidy confirmed. "Whether she believed me or not, I do not know, but I tried." Cole absorbed this story, understanding now where some of her wariness came from. "For what it is worth, I am not interested in your business except as a way to earn honest pay. And I would never try to manipulate you or anyone else like that." "Time will tell," Cassidy said, but her voice had lost some of its hardness. "You have not asked me why I told you that story." "Figure you will tell me if you want me to know," Cole replied. She glanced at him, and in the moonlight her smile was small but genuine. "You are a strange man, Cole Brennan. Most people cannot stand silence, feel compelled to fill every moment with chatter. You seem comfortable just being." "Learned it on the trail," Cole said. "Sometimes there is nothing worth saying, so you might as well appreciate the quiet." They stood watch together for the next 2 hours, occasionally trading observations about the night sounds or the movement of shadows, but mostly just existing in comfortable silence. When their shift ended and Jack and Pete took over, Cole found himself oddly reluctant to return to the camp and his bedroll. The next days fell into a rhythm. They rose before dawn, broke camp quickly, and were on the trail as the sun climbed. Cole drove one of the wagons, learning the peculiarities of the team and the trail from Jack, who proved to be an excellent teacher. At night, he cooked while the others tended the stock and made camp, and the meals became a point of pride as he experimented with what limited ingredients they carried. Cassidy remained watchful and reserved, but Cole noticed small things. The way she made sure every man got enough rest. How she never asked anyone to do anything she would not do herself. The genuine concern in her eyes when Pete mentioned his wife was expecting their third child and hoping this job would bring enough money to expand their cabin before winter. On the 5th day, they reached Cheyenne and spent 2 days loading the wagons with supplies for the return trip. Cole helped with the heavy work, earning approving nods from the warehouse workers who dealt with Cassidy regularly. "You picked a good one this time, Miss Wolfe," one of them told her as they secured the last load. "Strong back, good attitude, does not complain." "We will see if he lasts," Cassidy replied, but Cole caught the hint of pride in her voice and felt absurdly pleased. The return journey started well enough, but on the second day out of Cheyenne, trouble found them. It came in the form of 5 men on horseback who appeared on the trail ahead, blocking their path. Cassidy held up her hand, signaling the wagons to stop. Her other hand rested on her revolver, ready but not drawn. "Gentlemen," she called out calmly, "you are in our way, I suggest you move." The leader, a scarred man with cold eyes and a rifle across his saddle, smiled without humor. "Now that is not very friendly. We heard you might be carrying payroll back to the diggings. We would like to relieve you of that burden. And I would like to keep it, along with everything else in these wagons," Cassidy replied evenly. "So we seem to be at an impasse. There are 5 of us and 6 of you, but you got 3 wagons to protect," Scarface pointed out. "You cannot shoot us all before we drop at least some of you, and then where would that leave you? Short-handed and still being robbed. How about you just hand over the payroll and everyone goes home alive?" Cole felt his muscles tense, his hand moving slowly toward his gun. He could see Jack and the others doing the same, all of them waiting for Cassidy's signal. The air felt thick with tension, everything balanced on the edge of violence. Cassidy sat perfectly still on her horse, and when she spoke, her voice was ice. "Here is my counteroffer. You turn around and ride away right now, and I do not kill you. You try to rob this train, and I drop you first, then your friends, and I leave your bodies for the crows. Your choice." Scarface laughed, but it sounded forced. "Big talk from a woman, not talk," Cassidy said softly. "Promise." Her hand moved faster than Cole would have thought possible, her revolver clearing leather and firing in one smooth motion. The shot took Scarface's hat clean off his head, the bullet passing so close it probably singed his hair. For a frozen moment, nobody moved. Then Cassidy said, still in that terribly calm voice, "The next one goes through your skull. Leave. Now." Scarface looked into her eyes, and whatever he saw there made him swallow hard. "This is not over," he said, trying to salvage some pride as he wheeled his horse around. His companions followed, all of them clearly relieved to be leaving intact. The freight crew watched them go, weapons still drawn until they disappeared over a rise. Only then did Cassidy holster her gun, and Cole saw that her hand was rock steady. "Boss," Moses said quietly, "that was either the bravest or craziest thing I have ever seen." "They were testing us," Cassidy said flatly. "If we had shown fear or hesitation, they would have attacked. The only way to handle men like that is to be scarier than they are." She looked at her crew, her eyes moving from face to face. "Everyone all right?" They all nodded, though Danny looked a little pale. Cole met her gaze and nodded firmly, letting her see his steady support. She held his eyes for a moment longer than necessary, and something unspoken passed between them, some acknowledgement of trust and respect. "Move out," Cassidy ordered. "I want 5 more miles before we camp tonight. They might come back with friends, and I want to be long gone before then." They pushed hard the rest of that day, not stopping until nearly dark. The camp that night was tense, everyone on edge expecting attack. Cassidy doubled the watch, and when Cole took his turn with her again, he could feel the adrenaline still humming through both of them. "That was closer than I like," she admitted quietly. "Usually I can talk bandits down or scare them off, but that one was determined." "You handled it perfectly," Cole said. "Any of us would have backed your play, but you did not need us. That was all you, not all me," Cassidy corrected. "I knew my crew was ready. That confidence made the bluff work. If I had been alone or with men I could not trust, it might have gone very differently." "But we are not men you cannot trust," Cole pointed out. "We are your crew, and we have your back." She turned to look at him fully, and in the dim light from the distant campfire, her face was softer than he had yet seen it. "Why did you really sign on, Cole? And do not tell me you just needed work. You could have found that anywhere." Cole considered lying or deflecting, but something about the moment demanded honesty. "Because I walked into that saloon expecting another boring day in another boring town. And then I saw you standing there with a smoking gun and fire in your eyes, and I thought, finally, someone interesting. Someone real. I have been drifting for 3 years, Cassidy, looking for something without knowing what it was. Then I met you, and for the first time since I left Texas, I felt like maybe I had found it. She was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said softly, "That is either the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me, or you are a much better liar than the last man who tried to manipulate me." "I am not lying," Cole said simply, "and I am not trying to manipulate you. I am just telling you the truth because I think you deserve it." "I do not know what to do with you, Cole Brennan," Cassidy admitted. "I am not good at this, at trusting people or letting them close. Every time I have tried, it has ended badly." "Then maybe do not try," Cole suggested. "Maybe just let things happen naturally and see where they go. No expectations, no pressure, just two people getting to know each other." "That's simple?" Cassidy asked skeptically. "Could be," Cole replied, "if we let it be." She shook her head slowly, but she was smiling slightly. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing worthwhile is easy," Cole said, "but that does not mean it is not worth doing." They finished their watch in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before, charged with possibility and the beginnings of something neither of them quite dared to name yet. The rest of the journey back to Deadwood was uneventful, though they maintained vigilance in case Scarface and his friends returned with reinforcements. They never did, and Cole suspected Cassidy's reputation had grown even more fearsome after that confrontation, which would only help protect future shipments. When they finally rolled into Deadwood on a warm afternoon 16 days after leaving Cheyenne, Cole felt an odd mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that they had made it safely, disappointment that the journey was ending. He had grown to enjoy the rhythm of the trail, the camaraderie of the crew, and most especially the quiet moments with Cassidy during their night watches. The wagons were unloaded, the payroll delivered safely to the mining company, and Cassidy paid her crew their wages with a bonus for the trouble-free run. Jack, Pete, Moses, and Danny all shook Cole's hand and told him they hoped he would sign on for the next trip. "You fit in good," Moses said. "That is rare. Usually takes a man 3 or 4 runs before he really belongs. You belonged by the end of the first week." "Appreciate that," Cole said honestly. He had grown to like and respect these men, valued their acceptance more than he had expected. When the others had gone, Cole found Cassidy in the freight office, updating the ledgers with the trip's accounts. She looked up as he entered, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You did good work, Cole," she said. "If you want another run, you have got a place with this crew." "I want another run," Cole confirmed. "But right now, I believe you owe me a dinner." Cassidy set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Do I now? You said if I was still in Deadwood when you got back and still interested, we could discuss it," Cole reminded her. "I am both those things." "So you are," Cassidy acknowledged. She stood and moved around the desk, stopping close enough that Cole could smell that faint hint of lavender he remembered from their first meeting. "There is a decent restaurant in town, believe it or not, Mrs. Chen runs it, came out from San Francisco 2 years ago when her husband struck it rich. He died of the fever last year, but she kept the business going. Best food in Deadwood, and that is not saying much, but it is edible and she does not water down the whiskey." "Sounds perfect," Cole said. "When?" "Tonight," Cassidy decided. "I need to finish these ledgers and clean up, but meet me there at 7 o'clock. It is on the west end of Main Street. You cannot miss it." "I will be there," Cole promised. He spent the rest of the afternoon making himself presentable, which was a challenge given his limited wardrobe and the fact that everything he owned was dusty from the trail. He washed thoroughly, shaved carefully, and put on his one good shirt that was not too worn or stained. It would have to do. Mrs. Chen's restaurant turned out to be a small but tidy establishment with real tablecloths and actual plates, instead of the tin dishes most Deadwood eateries favored. The proprietress herself greeted Cole at the door, a small woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet competence. "You must be Miss Wolfe's dinner companion," she said with a knowing smile. "She sent word you would be coming. She is already here in the back corner. Cole followed her gesture and spotted Cassidy sitting at a table near the back window. She had cleaned up as well, trading her trail clothes for a simple but well-made dress in deep blue that brought out the green in her eyes. Her hair was down for the first time since he had met her, falling in dark waves past her shoulders, and the sight of her made his breath catch slightly. She looked up as he approached and smiled, genuine and warm. "You clean up nicely, Brennan." "I could say the same," Cole replied, taking the seat across from her. "You look beautiful, Cassidy." A slight flush colored her cheeks. "Empty flattery and meaningless gestures, remember." "Not empty and not meaningless," Cole corrected gently, "just an honest observation." Mrs. Chen appeared with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "I brought the good bottle," she said, pouring for both of them. "Special occasion." "Is it a special occasion?" Cassidy asked Cole after Mrs. Chen had retreated to give them privacy. "Feels like it might be," Cole said. He raised his glass. "To successful freight runs and second chances. And to men who are not scared off by women with tempers," Cassidy added, clinking her glass against his. The meal that followed was simple but well prepared. Roasted chicken with vegetables, fresh bread, and a berry pie for dessert. More importantly, the conversation flowed easily, without the awkwardness Cole had half expected. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for the future. Cole learned that Cassidy wanted to expand the freight business, maybe add a passenger service for people traveling between Cheyenne and Deadwood. She wanted to build something lasting, something that would matter beyond just surviving another season. In turn, Cole found himself opening up about things he rarely discussed: the pain of losing his family, the loneliness of the last few years, the sense that he had been searching for something he could not name. "Maybe you were searching for a place to belong," Cassidy suggested quietly. "That is what I was looking for after my father died. Not just a business to run, but a purpose, a reason to get up every day and keep fighting." "Did you find it?" Cole asked. "I think so," Cassidy said. "The business gives me that and my crew, knowing I am responsible for their livelihoods and safety. It matters, you know, what we do matters to people." "It does," Cole agreed. "And maybe I have been looking for that too, something that matters, someone who matters." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Cassidy looked at him searchingly, and Cole let her see everything he was feeling, holding nothing back. "I am still not easy to be around," she warned. "I still have that temper, still scare men who are not used to women who speak their minds and carry guns." "Good," Cole said, echoing his words from their first meeting. "I am still bored with ordinary, and you are anything but that." Cassidy laughed softly, shaking her head. "You are incorrigible." "I am honest," Cole corrected. "And maybe a little bit smitten." "More than a little, I think," Cassidy said, but her eyes were warm, accepting. They lingered over the meal until Mrs. Chen started giving them pointed looks, then walked slowly back through town together. The night was clear and cool, stars blazing overhead, and Cole offered Cassidy his arm without thinking. She took it after only a moment's hesitation, and the simple contact felt right in a way Cole could not quite articulate. When they reached the freight office where Cassidy kept a small apartment upstairs, she turned to face him. "Thank you for dinner, it was nice." "Nice," Cole repeated with mock offense. "I was aiming for at least pleasant, possibly even enjoyable." "It was both those things too," Cassidy admitted. She hesitated, then said, "I leave again in 2 weeks. Another run to Cheyenne and back. You should come with us again." "I plan to," Cole assured her. "And maybe between now and then we could do this again. The dinner part, I mean." "I would like that," Cassidy said simply. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, a brief touch that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through Cole's entire body. "Good night, Cole Brennan." "Good night, Cassidy Wolfe," he replied, watching as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. He walked back to Mrs. Harper's boarding house with a smile on his face and hope in his heart, feeling more alive than he had in years. The next 2 weeks established a pattern that would define the rest of that summer. Cole took odd jobs around Deadwood to keep himself busy and earning, working as a guard for some of the smaller mining operations and helping repair wagons at the freight office. But the best parts of those days were the evenings spent with Cassidy. They had dinner together several more times, sometimes at Mrs. Chen's restaurant, once at a surprisingly decent steakhouse that had opened near the edge of town. They went for walks in the hills above Deadwood when Cassidy could spare the time, talking about everything from politics to philosophy to the simple pleasure of watching the sun set over the Black Hills. Cole learned more about her with each passing day. Her favorite color was the deep blue of twilight. She could not carry a tune to save her life but loved to hear music. She read voraciously, everything from dime novels to Shakespeare, and had opinions on all of it. She was fiercely protective of the people she cared about and unforgiving of those who crossed her. And she was slowly, cautiously, beginning to trust him. It showed in small ways. The way she would reach for his hand when they walked. The genuine laughter he could coax from her with a well-timed joke. The softness in her eyes when she looked at him, replacing the wariness that had been there at first. The second freight run went smoothly. No bandits or trouble, just 3 weeks of hard work and the growing connection between Cole and Cassidy. The rest of the crew noticed and approved, Jack even going so far as to tell Cole he had been wrong to warn him off. "Thought you were just some drifter looking for a quick romance," the older man admitted. "But I can see this is different. You are good for her, Cole. She smiles more these days, seems lighter somehow." "She is good for me too," Cole replied honestly. "Makes me want to be better, do better." By the time they rolled back into Deadwood in late July, Cole knew he was in love with Cassidy Wolfe. He had probably known it since that first day in the saloon, but now it was undeniable, a truth that burned bright and certain in his chest. The question was whether she felt the same, and if so, when and how to tell her. The answer came unexpectedly one evening when they were sitting together on the hillside above town, watching the lights come on as darkness fell. They had ridden out after finishing the day's work, both wanting to escape the noise and smell of Deadwood for a while. "I used to come up here with my father," Cassidy said quietly. "Before he got sick, we would ride out here once a month or so, just to remember there was more to life than freight manifests and ledgers and the constant struggle to keep the business afloat." "What would you talk about?" Cole asked. "Everything," Cassidy said with a soft smile. "He would tell me stories about my mother, who died when I was little. He would talk about his dreams for the business, for me. He wanted me to be happy, to find something or someone that made all the hard work worthwhile." "Do you think you have found that?" Cole asked carefully. Cassidy was quiet for a long moment, and Cole could feel his heart hammering in his chest, waiting for her answer. Finally, she turned to look at him, and her eyes were bright with emotion. "I think maybe I have," she said softly. "I am scared to say it out loud, scared to admit it even to myself, because every time I have trusted someone, it has ended badly. But you are different, Cole. You see me, really see me, not just the parts that are useful or convenient. You are not trying to change me or control me or make me smaller. You just accept who I am, temper and all." "I love who you are," Cole said, the words coming out before he could second-guess them. "I love your strength and your stubbornness and yes, even your temper. I love that you shoot mirrors when men disrespect you and face down bandits without flinching. I love how you care for your crew and honor your contracts and keep your word. I love everything about you, Cassidy Wolfe, and I would consider it the greatest honor of my life if you would let me stay by your side and love you for as long as you will have me." Tears spilled down Cassidy's cheeks, but she was smiling, radiant and beautiful. "I love you too," she whispered. "God help me. I did not want to, tried not to, but I love you, Cole Brennan. You walked into my life and turned everything upside down, and I am so glad you did." Cole cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her, soft and reverent at first, then deeper as she pressed closer to him. It felt like coming home, like finding the piece of himself that had been missing for so long. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassidy laughed shakily. "So what happens now?" "Now we figure it out together," Cole said simply. "I am not going anywhere, Cassidy. I have found what I was looking for, and I am staying right here. Even when I am difficult and stubborn and my temper gets the better of me," Cassidy asked. "Especially then," Cole confirmed. "Though I reserve the right to tell you when you are being unreasonable, and you have to promise not to shoot me for it." "I will try to restrain myself," Cassidy said with a grin. She kissed him again, then rested her head against his shoulder. "My crew is going to be insufferable about this. Jack has been making knowing comments for weeks." "Let them be insufferable," Cole said contentedly. "I do not care what anyone else thinks or says. I only care about you." They stayed on that hillside until the stars came out and the moon rose, talking and planning and simply existing together in the perfect peace of new love. When they finally rode back to town, hand in hand even though it made controlling the horses awkward, Cole felt more certain of his path than ever before. The rest of the summer and into the fall, their relationship deepened and strengthened. Cole continued working the freight runs, now as much a permanent fixture of the crew as Jack or Moses. He moved out of Mrs. Harper's boarding house and into the small apartment above the freight office with Cassidy. And if the good folks of Deadwood had opinions about unmarried couples living together, they kept them mostly to themselves. Cassidy's reputation for not tolerating judgment probably helped with that. They settled into a comfortable rhythm, working together during the day and retreating to their shared space at night. Cole discovered that Cassidy talked in her sleep sometimes, usually about freight schedules and stubborn mules. Cassidy learned that Cole was useless before his first cup of coffee, and that he had a habit of humming tunelessly while he cooked. They had their first real fight in September, when Cassidy wanted to take a dangerous shortcut through the mountains to make up time, and Cole argued it was too risky with winter weather coming on. Voices were raised, tempers flared, and at one point Cassidy threw a ledger book at his head. Though she missed on purpose, in the end, they compromised on a middle route that was faster than the regular trail but safer than Cassidy's proposed shortcut. And after the anger cooled, they made up thoroughly, Cassidy admitting that maybe she had been too focused on efficiency and not enough on safety. Cole acknowledging that he had been overly cautious and needed to trust her judgment more. "We are going to fight sometimes," Cassidy said as they lay together that night. "I am never going to be a sweet, biddable woman who defers to her man on everything." "Good," Cole said, pulling her closer. "I do not want that. I want you exactly as you are. Even when you are throwing things at my head." "I missed on purpose," Cassidy pointed out. "I noticed and appreciated the restraint," Cole assured her. As fall deepened and the first snow began to dust the Black Hills, Cole knew it was time to make things official. He had been thinking about it for weeks, planning and plotting, trying to figure out the right way to ask the most important question of his life. He sought out Jack one day when they were loading wagons for what would likely be their last run before winter made the trails impassable. "I need your help," he said quietly. "I want to ask Cassidy to marry me, but I do not have much money for a ring and I want to do this right." Jack's weathered face split into a huge grin. "About time, son. I have been wondering when you would get around to it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "My wife wanted you to have this. It was her grandmother's ring brought over from Ireland. She says Cassidy is like the daughter we never had, and she would be honored if Cassidy wore it." Cole opened the pouch carefully and found a simple gold band with a small emerald, worn smooth with age but still beautiful. "Jack, I cannot take this. It is too much." "You can and you will," Jack said firmly. "That ring should go to someone who will appreciate it, someone who will wear it with pride. Cassidy is that someone, and you are the man who loves her enough to deserve giving it to her." "Thank you," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for everything, Jack." For taking a chance on me, for teaching me, for accepting me into the crew. For being a friend. You earned it all, Jack said, clapping him on the shoulder. Now you just need to figure out how to ask her without getting shot for being overly romantic. That turned out to be the real challenge. Cole knew Cassidy well enough by now to know that a big public proposal would mortify her, but he also wanted the moment to be special, memorable. He agonized over it for days before the solution came to him. Their last run of the season was scheduled to end in mid-November, and Cole arranged with Mrs. Chen to have a special dinner waiting for them when they returned. Not at the restaurant, but at a spot Cole had discovered during one of his explorations outside town, a clearing with a view of the entire valley, sheltered enough to be comfortable even in the cooling weather. The freight run went perfectly. No trouble, no delays, just hard work and the knowledge that after this trip, they would have nearly 3 months together in Deadwood before the spring run started. Cole could barely contain his nervous energy, checking the ring in his pocket a dozen times a day to make sure it was still there. Jack noticed and just grinned, keeping Cole's secret. The other members of the crew had figured out something was up, but had the good grace not to pry, though Danny kept giving Cole encouraging thumbs up behind Cassidy's back. They rolled into Deadwood on a crisp November afternoon, the air sharp with the promise of winter. After the wagons were unloaded and the crew paid, Cole caught Cassidy's hand. "I have a surprise for you. Come with me." "A surprise?" Cassidy asked suspiciously. "You know I do not like surprises." "You will like this one," Cole promised. "Trust me." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "I trust you. Lead the way." He had arranged for 2 horses to be saddled and waiting, and they rode out of town into the fading afternoon light. Cassidy did not ask questions, just rode beside him with easy confidence, trusting him to know where he was going. When they reached the clearing, she gasped softly. "Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, setting up a small table with a white cloth, candles protected by glass chimneys against the wind, and covered dishes that promised a good meal. Blankets were spread nearby in case they got cold, and the view stretched out before them, spectacular in the golden light of approaching sunset. "Cole, this is beautiful," Cassidy said softly. "When did you arrange all this?" "I had help," Cole admitted. "Mrs. Chen, Jack, half the crew." "I wanted tonight to be special." "It is," Cassidy assured him, squeezing his hand. "You did not have to go to all this trouble, though. I would have been happy with just you." "I know," Cole said, "but you deserve more than just me. You deserve grand gestures and special moments and all the romance I can possibly manage, even though I know it makes you uncomfortable." "It does not make me uncomfortable when it comes from you," Cassidy said quietly, "because I know you mean it. No, it is not some game or manipulation. When you do something romantic, it is because you genuinely want to make me happy, not because you are trying to obligate me or control me." They ate the meal Mrs. Chen had prepared, laughing and talking as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. When the food was finished and the stars began to appear overhead, Cole stood and held out his hand to Cassidy. "Dance with me," he said. "There is no music," Cassidy pointed out, though she took his hand and let him pull her up. "Do not need music," Cole replied, pulling her close and beginning to sway gently. "We can make our own." They moved together in the starlight, and Cole hummed tunelessly, making Cassidy laugh. After a few minutes, he stopped dancing but kept holding her close, looking into her eyes. "Cassidy Wolfe," he said softly. "I came to Deadwood 5 months ago with no direction, no purpose, nothing but a vague hope that maybe I would find something to make life interesting again. Then I walked into a saloon and met a woman who was like nobody I had ever known. You challenged me, intrigued me, and somewhere along the way, you became the most important person in my world." He released her long enough to pull the ring from his pocket, dropping to one knee in the grass. Cassidy's eyes went wide, her hands flying to her mouth. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person," Cole continued. "I love your strength and your fire, your loyalty and your courage. I want to spend the rest of my life working beside you, building a future with you, loving you through every joy and challenge that comes our way. Cassidy Jane Wolfe, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Cassidy's face as she looked at him, at the ring, at the love and hope shining in his eyes. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes, Cole Brennan, I will marry you, 1,000 times yes. Cole stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he finally set her down, he kissed her deeply, pouring everything he felt into that contact. I love you, Cassidy said when they finally broke apart. I love you so much it scares me sometimes, how much I need you, how much better everything is when you are beside me. You do not need me, Cole corrected gently. You are strong enough to handle anything on your own, but I hope you want me because I definitely want you. I want to be your partner in everything, your equal, the person you turn to when things get hard and the one you celebrate with when they go right. I want that too, Cassidy said fervently. All of it, everything with you. They stayed in that clearing until late into the night, wrapped in blankets against the cold, making plans for their wedding and their future. They decided to marry in the spring, after the first freight runs of the season, when the weather would be decent, and they could invite friends from both Deadwood and Cheyenne. When they finally rode back to town in the early hours of the morning, both exhausted but happier than either had ever been, they found the freight office dark except for one lamp in the window. Jack had left a note on the desk congratulating them and informing them that the entire crew had a bet going on how long it would take Cole to propose, and Danny had won by guessing November. Our crew is nosy and meddlesome, Cassidy said, but she was smiling as she read the note. Our crew is invested in our happiness, Cole corrected. They love you, Cassidy. They want good things for you. They love you too, Cassidy pointed out. You are part of the family now, have been since that first run, really. That winter was the happiest Cole had ever known. Deadwood was snowed in for weeks at a time, the trails impassable, but he did not mind being confined to town. He spent his days helping Cassidy with the business planning for the next season, ordering new equipment and supplies, reviewing contracts and negotiating rates. In the evenings, they would retreat to their apartment, cooking together or reading aloud to each other or simply sitting by the fire and talking. Cole proposed expanding the business to include passenger service, as Cassidy had mentioned wanting, and together they worked out the logistics and costs. It would require investment and risk, but they both believed it would pay off. There was a steady demand for safe, reliable transportation between Cheyenne and Deadwood, and Cassidy's reputation for security and professionalism would serve them well. They married on a bright April morning in 1877, 6 weeks after the trails opened enough for regular travel again. The ceremony was held outdoors in the same clearing where Cole had proposed, with nearly everyone from Deadwood in attendance. Jack stood as Cole's best man, and Pete's wife Sarah served as Cassidy's attendant, both of them beaming with pride. Cassidy wore a simple dress in cream-colored silk, her hair loose and flowing with wildflowers woven into a crown. She looked like something out of a dream, and when Cole saw her walking toward him through the spring grass, his breath caught and tears pricked his eyes. The ceremony itself was brief, conducted by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through town. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of partnership and respect and enduring love. When the preacher finally pronounced them married, Cole kissed his wife with all the joy and love in his heart, and the assembled crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with food and drink and dancing. Moses played the fiddle, surprisingly talented, while couples spun across the grass. Even Marshall Carter showed up with his wife, offering congratulations and a bottle of good whiskey as a wedding gift. "Take care of her," the old lawman told Cole quietly. "She is one of the good ones and too rare to lose." "I will spend every day of my life taking care of her," Cole promised. and letting her take care of me in return because that is what partners do. Cole and Cassidy Brennan, as she was now legally known though she kept Wolfe for business purposes, spent their wedding night in the apartment above the freight office, too exhausted and happy to care that it was not some fancy hotel. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, full of hope and plans for the future. The next years were not easy, but they were good. The freight business prospered, and the passenger service Cole had proposed took off beyond their expectations. They added more wagons, hired more crew, opened a second office in Cheyenne. Cassidy's reputation for reliability and security made their operation the most sought-after in the region. There were challenges, of course. A particularly harsh winter in 1878 killed half their livestock and forced them to take out loans to replace the animals. A rival freight company tried to undercut their prices and spread rumors about their reliability, forcing Cassidy to personally confront the owner and set the record straight in a way that left no doubt about her willingness to defend her business. Cole stood beside her through all of it, handling the parts of the business she disliked, like the endless paperwork and contract negotiations, while she focused on operations and the physical work she excelled at. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. Their fights, when they happened, were fierce but short-lived, neither of them able to stay angry when they loved each other so much. Cole learned to recognize when Cassidy needed space to cool down before they could talk rationally. Cassidy learned that Cole needed verbal reassurance sometimes, needed to hear that she still loved him even when they disagreed. In the spring of 1879, Cassidy realized she was pregnant. The news brought mixed emotions for both of them. Joy at the idea of a child, certainly, but also fear. The frontier was dangerous, especially for women and children. Childbirth itself carried significant risks, and they both knew women who had died bringing babies into the world. "I am scared," Cassidy admitted one night as they lay in bed, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I have faced down bandits and blizzards and every kind of trouble the trail can throw at me, but this terrifies me." "Me too," Cole confessed. "But we will face it together, like we face everything. And we will love this child with everything we have, give them the best life we possibly can." "What if I am not a good mother?" Cassidy worried. "I am not exactly the nurturing type." "You are loyal and protective and fierce," Cole said firmly. "You love hard and completely. That is exactly what a child needs. You are going to be an amazing mother, Cassidy. I have no doubts about that." She gave up the freight runs during her pregnancy, much as it chafed her to stay behind. Cole continued working them, though he hated leaving her, always hurrying back to Deadwood as quickly as possible. Jack took over as trail boss when Cole was gone, and the crew rallied around both of them, determined to keep the business running smoothly so Cassidy would not worry. Their son was born on a cold December morning, after a labor that lasted nearly 20 hours, and left both Cole and Cassidy exhausted. But when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in Cassidy's arms, all the fear and pain faded into wonder. "He is perfect," Cassidy whispered, tears streaming down her face as she studied the tiny red face and waving fists. "Cole, look at him. He is perfect." Cole, who had been terrified throughout the entire ordeal, felt his own tears fall as he looked at his son, his family. "He is," he agreed hoarsely. "Thank you, Cassidy. Thank you for him, for everything." They named him Thomas, after Cassidy's father, with Cole's father's name, James, as his middle name. Little Tommy, as he quickly became known, was a healthy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He had lungs that could wake the entire building when he wanted to be fed and a grip that was surprisingly strong for something so tiny. Cassidy proved to be exactly the kind of mother Cole had known she would be, fiercely protective and endlessly patient with their son, even when exhaustion made her short-tempered with everyone else. She learned to nurse him while reviewing ledgers, to rock him to sleep while discussing business plans with Cole, to balance motherhood and running a freight empire with the same determination she brought to everything else. Cole discovered depths of love he had not known existed, looking at his wife with their son and feeling his heart expand impossibly further. He took over more of the freight runs so Cassidy could stay with Tommy, though he still hated being away from them. The separations were necessary but painful, and he always returned home with arms full of small gifts and trinkets he had picked up along the trail. As Tommy grew into a toddler and then a young boy, the freight business continued to expand. By 1882, they had operations running between 3 territories, employed over 30 people, and were looking at purchasing property in Denver for a 4th office. They had built something that mattered, something that would last. Tommy was 4 years old when Cassidy discovered she was pregnant again. This time the fear was less, tempered by experience and the knowledge that they had survived once before. Their daughter was born in the summer of 1883, an easier birth than Tommy's had been, though still exhausting. They named her Rose, and she was everything her brother was not. Where Tommy was loud and energetic, Rose was quiet and contemplative. Where he charged into everything head first, she observed and planned. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's fierce spirit, and from the moment she could walk, she followed Cassidy everywhere, determined to learn everything about the business. Life settled into a busy but happy rhythm. Cole and Cassidy juggled the demands of running a growing business with raising 2 children who were as stubborn and independent as their mother. Jack finally retired at 60, turning his responsibilities over to Danny, who had grown into a reliable and skilled trail boss. Moses continued working into his 60s, claiming he was too ornery to quit, and the trail was in his blood. They moved into a real house on the edge of Deadwood in 1884, a proper home with space for the children to run, and a large kitchen where Cole could cook the meals his family loved. The freight office and the apartment above it became solely business space, but Cassidy still spent most of her days there, managing the operation she had built. Tommy started school and proved to be bright but restless, always looking out the window and dreaming of adventures. Rose, 2 years younger, was more studious, constantly asking questions about everything from how freight contracts worked to why the sky was blue. Cole and Cassidy answered every question, encouraged every interest, determined to raise children who thought for themselves and chased their dreams. In the evenings, when the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Cole and Cassidy would sit together on the porch, watching the stars come out over the Black Hills. They would talk about the day, about the business, about their hopes for the children, about nothing at all. And sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, hands linked, content in the knowledge that they had built something real and lasting together. "Do you ever regret it?" Cassidy asked one night when they were sitting out there, the summer air warm and full of cricket song. "Staying in Deadwood, tying yourself to me and this life?" Cole turned to look at her, genuinely surprised. "Not for one single moment," he said firmly. "Cassidy, you gave me everything I did not know I needed: purpose, family, love. A reason to get up every morning and a place I actually want to come home to at night. How could I possibly regret the best decision I ever made?" "We have been married 8 years," Cassidy said softly. "And I still sometimes cannot believe you are real, that this is real. That I found someone who loves me not despite who I am but because of it." "I am real," Cole assured her, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. "And this is real. And I will love you for the rest of my life and beyond, Cassidy Brennan. That is a promise I made when I married you, and it is a promise I will keep until my last breath." She leaned over to kiss him, soft and sweet. "I love you too, Cole, more than I ever thought possible. You walked into my life and changed everything, and I thank God for it every day." They sat together until late in the night, holding hands and talking about their future. They discussed eventually passing the business to their children if that was what Tommy and Rose wanted, or selling it and doing something entirely different. They talked about maybe taking a real trip someday, seeing San Francisco, or even going back east to the cities Cassidy had only read about. But mostly they talked about staying right where they were, in the home they had built, the community they had become part of, the life they had created together from nothing but determination and love. As the years continued to pass, that life only grew richer and more meaningful. Tommy grew into a tall, strong young man who loved the freight business as much as his mother did, taking his first run as a teamster at 17, and proving he had inherited his parents' competence and courage. Rose showed more interest in the business side, spending hours in the office learning contracts and negotiations, already talking about expanding into railroad freight when the lines finally reached Deadwood. Cole and Cassidy grew older together, their hair showing gray, their faces lined with years of sun and weather and laughter. But the love between them never dimmed, never became routine or taken for granted. They still danced together in the kitchen when no one was watching. They still took rides into the hills to watch the sunset. They still fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms every night, grateful for another day together. The frontier itself was changing too. Deadwood was becoming more civilized, with real streets and proper buildings replacing the rough shanties of the early days. The gold rush that had built the town was winding down, but the community remained, evolving into something more stable and permanent. In 1892, 15 years after their wedding, Cole surprised Cassidy by taking her back to the clearing where he had proposed. The children were old enough to manage on their own for a few days, and he wanted to recreate that magical night. The clearing looked different now, the trees taller, the grass thicker, but the view was still spectacular. Cole had arranged everything just as he had that first time, with Mrs. Chen's help once again. The elderly restaurateur had cried when he asked, saying she remembered their wedding like it was yesterday. They ate and talked and danced under the stars, just as they had done a decade and a half earlier. And when Cole pulled Cassidy close and told her he would marry her all over again if he could, she kissed him with tears in her eyes and said she felt exactly the same. "You know what the best part is?" Cassidy said later as they lay on a blanket, watching the stars wheel overhead. "Every time I think I cannot possibly love you more than I already do, I discover I was wrong. My love just keeps growing, deepening, becoming more essential to who I am." "I know exactly what you mean," Cole replied, holding her tighter. "You are the best part of every day, Cassidy. The reason everything else matters. I could not imagine my life without you in it, and I never want to find out what that would be like." "You will not have to," Cassidy promised. "We are in this together, Cole Brennan, until the very end and whatever comes after." They returned to Deadwood renewed and reconnected, ready to face whatever the future brought. And that future proved to be full of both challenges and joys. The freight business continued to thrive even as the economy shifted and changed. They adapted, adding railroad freight as Rose had predicted, diversifying into different types of cargo, always staying ahead of the competition through innovation and Cassidy's unerring business instincts. Tommy married at 22, bringing home a strong-minded young woman named Sarah who reminded everyone of Cassidy in the best ways. They gave Cole and Cassidy their first grandchild a year later, a grandson named Cole Thomas Brennan, and holding that infant felt like coming full circle for Cole. Rose followed a different path, deciding at 18 that she wanted to go east to college, to study business formally and bring that knowledge back to help expand the family enterprise. It was hard to let her go, but Cole and Cassidy supported her decision, knowing that their fierce, brilliant daughter would thrive wherever she went. The letters Rose sent home were full of her experiences and observations, and she returned 4 years later with a degree and a head full of ideas for modernizing their operations. She also brought back a young lawyer named Daniel who was clearly besotted with her, and when Rose announced they were engaged, Cole found himself experiencing what Cassidy must have felt when Tommy got married, that bittersweet combination of joy and the knowledge that his child was truly grown. By the turn of the century, Cole and Cassidy were in their 50s, grandparents several times over, and still running the business they had built together. They had watched Deadwood grow from a wild mining camp into a real town, had seen the frontier give way to something more settled and civilized. The wild days of bandits and shootouts were mostly behind them, replaced by contracts and schedules and the steady work of maintaining an empire. But the love between them had not become settled or civilized. It burned as bright as ever, maybe brighter for having weathered storms and celebrated triumphs together. They still fought sometimes, Cassidy's temper occasionally flaring when things did not go her way, Cole growing stubborn when he thought she was taking unnecessary risks. But they always made up, always remembered that whatever they were arguing about was less important than what they had together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Cole and Cassidy renewed their vows in the same clearing where they had married, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and the friends who had become family over the years. Tommy and Rose stood beside them this time, both crying as they watched their parents promise once again to love and cherish each other for the rest of their days. "I think about that day you walked into the saloon," Cassidy said during the small celebration afterward. "I was so angry, had just shot that mirror, was ready to fight the whole world, and you just sat down and started talking to me like I was interesting instead of terrifying." "You were interesting," Cole said with a grin. "Still are. I told you I was bored and you fixed that permanently." 25 years, Cassidy marveled. 25 years of building a life together, raising children, running a business, loving each other through everything that came our way. It went by so fast. "And we have got plenty more years ahead of us," Cole assured her. "I plan on loving you for at least another 25, preferably more." "Deal," Cassidy said, kissing him softly. "Though fair warning, I am probably going to get more stubborn and difficult as I get older." "Good," Cole said, using the word that had started everything all those years ago. "I would not want you any other way." They continued working together into their 60s, though they gradually handed over more responsibilities to Tommy and Rose, trusting their children to carry on what they had built. Cole especially enjoyed his role as grandfather, taking the grandchildren on rides through the hills and teaching them to cook, passing on skills and stories. Cassidy remained fierce and protective, still willing to fight for what was right even as her hair went white and her hands showed the wear of a lifetime of hard work. She was a legend in the territory, the woman who had built a freight empire through sheer determination and refused to let anyone tell her what she could or could not do. But more than that, she was a wife and mother and grandmother who loved fiercely and completely. She was Cole's partner in every sense of the word, his equal, his best friend, his everything. When they finally retired fully in 1908, handing over the reins of Brennan Freight to Tommy and Rose, it felt right. They had built something that would last beyond them, had created a legacy that mattered. Now it was time to enjoy the fruits of all that hard work. They spent their retirement much as they had spent their courtship and marriage together. They traveled some, visiting Rose in Denver and taking a trip to San Francisco that Cassidy had always dreamed about. They spent time with their grandchildren, watching them grow and learn and become their own people. They sat on their porch in the evenings and talked about everything and nothing, hands linked, content in the knowledge that they had built a good life together. Cole was 73 when he finally told Cassidy one evening that he was tired, more tired than he had ever been. She held his hand and told him it was all right, that they had lived a good life and loved well, and that was all anyone could ask for. He died peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, with Cassidy holding him, telling him one last time how much she loved him and how grateful she was for every moment they had shared. Cassidy followed him 2 years later, her fierce spirit finally ready to rest. Her last words were about Cole, about how she would see him soon and they would dance together again under the stars. They were buried side by side in the Deadwood cemetery, under a simple stone that read Cole and Cassidy Brennan, partners in life and love. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to remember them, to share stories about the fierce woman and the steady man who had built an empire together and loved each other through everything. The freight business they had created continued for another generation before finally being sold, but the legacy of what they had accomplished lived on. Not just in the business, but in the family they had raised, the community they had been part of, the lives they had touched. And in the story that was still told in Deadwood decades later, about the woman who shot a mirror and the cowboy who said he was bored, and how they found in each other exactly what they had been searching for all along. Love, partnership, purpose, and a life well lived together. It was a story of the Wild West, but more than that, it was a love story. The best kind, the kind that endured through hardship and challenge, that grew stronger with time instead of fading, that proved that when two people are truly meant for each other, nothing can keep them apart. Cole Brennan had walked into a saloon one hot June day in 1876, looking for something to relieve his boredom. He found Cassidy Wolfe instead, and she gave him everything he had been missing. And together, they built something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love and partnership and two stubborn people who refused to give up on each other or the life they were creating together. That was their story, the story of how a fierce woman with a temper and a bored cowboy found each other in the chaos of the frontier and built a love that would echo through generations. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating for all time. And in the end, it was a story with the only ending that mattered, the one where love won and they lived happily, truly and completely together.